Okay, in yesterday's session we have seen how to create service in Angular, then how to inject that into your component, and right now the service is returning a hard coded text, but this service will call an API. That API internally it will um, get the data. The API internally it communicates with the database and it will pull the data. So this is our API. Just run the API, and now we will see how to call that API from this service and retrieve the data. Once we retrieve the data into service, then we'll pass it to component. Okay, so basically Angular application, how to call a API. It's an interview question. So we can use HttpClient to call the API. So let's do that. Let's define that. So this is my service, patient service. So here I am defining HTTP client. So this will be of type HTTP client. So this is not available. We need to inject this. So import from it. This will be, is it at the rate Angular? So how to know a particular class is in which uh, namespace? So HTTP client in Angular. So HTTP client in Angular. This is Angular official website. So this is the class, and you can see the API. So it's a common HTTP. So you have to use Angular so you have to use Angular common in order to use the HTTP. Angular slash common. So this will be HTTP client. So it's saying something. At the rate Angular common slash HTTP. Yeah. So the slash HTTP. So in this namespace, we'll have the HTTP client. So this basically this HTTP client will be used to connect to your API. So let's do that. So this is the declaration at your service level, and we are going to inject here private HTTP of HTTP client. So we are assigning HTTP client equal to HTTP. So in this method, we are going to use that var return, okay, HTTP client dot. So if you see this, this HTTP client is a type of HTTP client, okay. So rename this HTTP client instance. Okay, so this HTTP client instance is a type of HTTP client, and this will be used to call the API methods. That's why when you are when you are HTTP client instance dot, you can see get, post, put, delete methods. So if you see these methods, so these are the methods of your API. If you go back to your API will have get method, put method, delete method, post method. So, but so by using this, you can call the methods and you can pass the parameters also. So, is it taking any parameters? HTTP get, it's not taking any parameters, but it's okay. Get dot subscribe. Okay, let's see this. Okay, just a second. But how to know which API we are calling? Which API we are calling? How to know that? Right? It should know the address of the API, right? So where we will define that? Any idea? Hello? Hello? Okay, so here we can specify the URL. We have to specify the URL, otherwise the API or the UI will, it doesn't know. So this is your patient information get method, right? So this is your URL. So your URL would be HTTP client uh, in the Angular. You will pass this URL, okay, and also you have to pass this, copy this from where we can copy this API patient information. Yeah, when you are calling it from Swagger, you are getting this data. So API patient information. Yeah, this is the get method. Copy this entire and put it in your Angular. Okay, so let's see this. Now run your Angular. Open command prompt. Patient information. So this is CMD. Okay, where is your CMD? Here it is. ng serve -o. Why it is giving client information unhandled exception 422 already in use. Okay, for why it's already in use? Are we running any application? Yeah, we are running it on 8080. Oh, the yesterday instance we are running. Yeah, it's compiling. Let's see. Okay, so when you click on patient, so let's see whether it calls the method or not. If it calls the method in API, we already set a breakpoint. It should hit the breakpoint, but it's not hitting means there is some issue with your application. So go to your debugging. So there is a console. You can see what is the error? HTTP get using the no provider HTTP client. So put a breakpoint in your code. So ng on in it. Yeah, put a breakpoint here and hit one more time. Where is our service? Put a breakpoint in the service. Clear console. Load one more time. Go to your sources. So this is your code. Okay. Put a click on uncaught promise patient service. So we are getting exception in the patient service. So put a breakpoint in the, it's not even hitting the get method. So put a breakpoint in the HTTP client. Yeah, in the constructor you put a breakpoint. Do we have any compile time errors? So there are no compile time errors. So it's not even hitting your load one more time. So the Angular debugging is little tricky and little difficult. Null injection error. So there is something, an issue with our dependency injection. Let's see what is that null. Why it is saying null injection. So here we are, this .http client. So this HTTP we used. So rename this to something else. Object. But this is saying it's never used. Okay. It successfully ran. Clear your console. Okay, just copy this exception and see what it is saying in the Google. Oh, we need to register this in the modules, I guess. Yeah, we have to register this in the modules. So let's check the answer. So HTTP client module we have to import. So this is not the answer. Okay, so this HTTP client module we have to use it in the imports. So go back here in the app modules. So use import from Angular common HTTP. So then HTTP client module, and this we have to import here. Client module. Okay, now run. So it successfully ran. Go back to your application, reload. So now we are not getting any exception, and let's see. So now it's working. Earlier it's not even hit this constructor. Okay, so it's in the constructor. We are calling a method. It's did it hit your okay, now yeah, get patient information. So now it's hitting the method get patient information. So here we are calling the method, and did we get the data? So okay, okay, so here in Angular we should not call the method directly, the service method. So what we have to do from the component dot subscribe patient information get information dot subscribe how to call a so not the where patient information get information dot subscribe. Just a second. I'm looking at the syntax. So here it's why the subscribe is not coming. Get repos. Just look at one simple example. But earlier we called this method. Okay, it should not be a problem. Okay, let's see. It's not returning data. It's not hitting the API. So let's dig into the code why it's not hitting. Do it one more time. Remove all other breakpoints and put only one breakpoint. Okay, get information dot object. Do you have any? Just a simple example here. So in the constructor, we are injecting. But it's not getting the data. So do we have subscribe here? Yes, I think we should have a subscribe in the get information method. Go to definition. So here, yeah, subscribe x dot. So here, HTTP client example with subscribe. HTTP client. I'll summarize the session example in Angular. So just check for subscribe. My system got hang. Communicating with the backend services. Yes, this one. Type of objects. No, not this one. Angular quick. Okay, if you see here, ng on init. Okay, get. Where is HTTP client? Okay, this dot request dot get. So this is again different. Okay, so this dot put, yeah, in the subscribe value. Okay, so here in the subscribe, uh, just a syntax. So subscribe value equal to x equal to, I put x. Okay, x equal to console dot log v x. So I'll explain once it return the data. Okay, run one more time because everything is in asynchronous mode. Everything is in asynchronous way. Where is our, okay, yeah, let it go and load one more time. Okay, we got here. Okay, now it's hitting the API. Did you see? This is API. Okay, so it's hitting the API and then it's returning the data, and that data you will see it here in the console. You will see. Hit one more time. Okay, Okay, it's hitting the database. Okay, I need to put a breakpoint here as well, but it's throwing some exception. Explain console errors by using the copylit. So what is this console response error? Unknown error. HTTP response base. Okay, so there is some, but it's hitting the API. Do it one more time. Though there is some exception, but it's hitting the API. So HTTP yes, subscribe, but there is some exception. So did it get exception? Console, go to the console. We are in the constructor. Okay, let it go. Data retrieved from service. This is patient information. Okay. In order to make it more understandable, okay. So did we need to make it? Yeah, put a, this is subscribe, this is response. Okay, just copy this entire thing. I'll explain the syntax again. So this is little, so from here you copy everything. So this is the subscribe. Okay, so this is the response. Okay, so here, so within the subscribe, so where did we define response? So val x dot, so within the subscribe we have a first parameter value. So this is first parameter, then the second parameter, this one, and the third parameter, this one, and we need to close the subscribe here. So here we are closing the subscribe. Oh, we need to close the subscribe outside. Okay, then yeah, we need to close the subscribe here. So if you see, we are closing subscribe here. Once we close the subscribe, yeah, close it, remove. Yeah, this will be your get function, and return statement should be after this. So there is some issue with opening and closing braces. So let's check that. Okay, remove this. So if you, okay, this is the opening and closing. This is the opening and closing. This is the opening and closing. So this one we are where we are closing. If you select the opening, the closing will be displayed, highlighted. Okay, so where is the closing for this? So the closing for this would be here. Yeah, now it makes sense. So run one more time. Remove. Okay. Okay, so it's not loading the latest one. Do we have any exceptions here? Okay, close this and run one more time. So you should see the latest data. So here what we are doing, we are calling the API and subscribe. So the API will be called in asynchronous way and the response will come here. So we should see the response. Put call in error. So there is some error. So what is that error? Declaration or statement expected. At line number 34, at line number 34, line number 34, so we are having, there is additional uh, brace, close that. Yeah, it's automatically picking. It's completed successfully. Reload this page. So go to developer tools. Yeah, it's little tricky and we have to look at different places. Okay, go to console, data retrieved. Okay, put a breakpoint in the console log, and so you can put some more statements here. So this is not put call, get call, get observable. Okay, so here if the API call is successful, this will execute this method. What is this? Get is success. So additional debugging. Okay, so let's see in the console what it is displaying. We are in the constructor. Okay, so the API, it did not hit. Okay, it's holding on the API only. Sorry. Okay, so the get call has some error. So here you can see the error. So what is that error? Headers. Okay. Unknown error. So first let's see whether the API is retrieving data successfully or not, or it's throwing some data. So okay, so this is now I'm debugging API. So I didn't see any issue with this API, but it's going into exception. So when there is an exception, it will go to the exception. HTTP failure response, unknown error. So there is an unknown error. Okay, I'll check this unknown error, what it is, and I'll fix that. But let's try to understand what we have done today. So first of all, I included this HTTP client class in my service. So in order to use this HTTP client in route, not in the routing module, in the app module, you have to register or you have to import HTTP client module. So from this namespace, I'm importing, and here I'm adding to my imports so that I can sorry, I can use the HTTP client module within my Angular module. So this HTTP client module will have the class called HTTP client. So if you see in the service, I declared a HTTP client instance which is of HTTP client, and here I am injecting it, and now by using this instance I can call the methods. So here var return equal to this dot, okay, so we no need this statement. Is it required, this statement? Just look at the syntax. Yeah, we no need this statement. So this dot HTTP instance dot get, and here I'm specifying the URL of my API. So what this will do, this statement will call the API, and we have seen when you are executing this, it's hitting the API. It's hitting the API get method. It's hitting the API get method. So this method is being executed because this is a type of get, okay, and it's not taking any parameters, and I'm calling the same method. So HTTP client and passing the URL, so it will know where to hit, and there are three, 1, 2, 3. So you listen this carefully. So this entire thing at line number 16, I'm calling the API. So when the call is successful and without any errors, the highlighted subscribe will be called, and in the X you will get the data. So the API will return some data, right? So in the X you will get the data, and the whole subscribe method will be executed. The highlighted from 17 to 20 will be executed when the API was successful. So the next section is 21 to 23, that is error. So in case of error, so when you are calling this API, if there is error, this particular section will be executed and you can see the error, and this will be executed in both the cases. Okay, so somehow we are not getting a proper response. Let's see, I'll debug that. Okay, it's calling. Okay, it's going into the error only. I'll check what is that error, and I'll fix that in the next session. But the whole idea is from Angular application how you are calling the APIs. So this is the way you have to use this, and you have to call the API, and if it is successful, the data will be returned into this X variable. Okay, so in the next session I'll fix that and I'll show that. Is that fine? Okay, we'll see it in the next session.